It was another thrilling North London derby. My heart is still beating. Emotionally drained, I think is the word to describe my feeling. We're live again. It's another Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Hello, good evening, and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by the Last Man Standing with loserpool.com. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and on this live edition, I am joined by my usual co-host, Mike Stavrou. Mike, welcome back. How are you, mate?
Exhausted.
I can imagine.
Tough watch.
It was tough. And I'm also joined by a very good friend and a colleague over at Sofa Sports Podcast. It's Mr. Dan De Luca, one of the very few Tottenham fans that I can tolerate. So I'm looking forward to a good discussion about the game. Dan, welcome back. You've been on before. How are you, mate?
Yeah, a bit like you, really. It was a bit of a tough watch, to be fair.
Absolutely emotionally drained, and we don't normally do our sort of match reviews on the same night, but it is a North London derby. It was a special fixture, so we're gonna do it now. We're live. We're on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. So don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe button, or whatever, depending on where you're watching from. And a big hello to those of you listening back on the audio, or of course those watching back the replay. Now, it was Arsenal 2. Tottenham Hotspur 2 in the end. Goals from Lacazette and Aubameyang from an Arsenal perspective, and of course Eriksen, and then Kane with a penalty. Kane with his standard North London derby penalty. You always seem to get one, don't you, Dan?
That's his fifth one. It's his fifth North London derby penalty, that is.
It's incredible. I mean, I don't think, though, Mike, we could have any complaints about this one in particular. We should really start with the first goal, but let's talk about the penalty while we're there. Granit Xhaka, a player I have defended for years and years and years, but it's just one too many moments of stupidity, isn't it? We've seen it again, extremely frustrating. There was no doubt in my mind sitting in the North Bank that was a penalty. I didn't need a replay. Mike, what was going through your head when you saw Atkinson point to the spot?
I mean, I would say I'm surprised, but I'm not, Harry. And you know as well, because I think you've sort of seen my Xhaka journey. Because I think when I first started jumping on the pod with you, I was adamant that I really disliked the guy. I thought he was awful. And I think last season, midway, there was some improvement there. I think he calmed down a bit and made less mistakes. But I mean, there's only so much you can take, Harry, to be fair, before he just becomes indefensible. Because when he's costing you points constantly, I mean, game after game in big moments, and it wasn't even just the rashness to give away the penalty. I mean, how many fouls did he give away in the entire game? I mean, it seemed like in the second half, every 2 minutes, Xhaka was fouling. And that's because he's just not a defensive player. He's got no defensive ability whatsoever. He's late in the challenge. He's unaware. He can't read situations, which means he's always diving in. And what they were saying in commentary is spot on. The best defenders are proactive, not reactive. They read situations, and actually they shouldn't really need to dive in whatsoever, even last minute. And Xhaka just doesn't do that. And someone was saying to me, yeah, but he's such a good passer. He makes the team tick. I don't care if he's Andrea Pirlo. If he makes mistakes like that, Harry, I can't have him. I think an important thing to say is that against the smaller teams, when we have a lot of the ball, you can sort of carry him. But in the big games where it matters and the game's going to be open as it was today, he's just a liability for me.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. Dan, let's start off by looking at the two teams that the managers picked. As always, it's really difficult to pick what Unai Emery is going to do. Just bringing them up on the screen here. So you could see Arsenal went with Bernd Leno in goal, back four of Ainsley Maitland-Niles, Socrates, David Luiz, Sead Kolasinac at left back. Of course, Nacho Monreal departed from the club yesterday. Lucas Torreira, Granit Xhaka, Matteo Guendouzi made up a midfield three with that front three that everybody's wanted to see: Nicolas Pepe, Alexander Lacazette, and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Now, in terms of Spurs news, Christian Eriksen was in the side. Jan Vertonghen was in the side. Dan, was you surprised to see Spurs line up the way they did?
I weren't surprised at the clientele. I expected Jan Vertonghen to come back today, but I thought it'd be as a 3. It was clear before the game we had a problem at right back. It was clear during the game, more so pretty much within seconds of the game started, we had a problem at right back, and that never got any better throughout the game. It was probably the worst individual performance I've seen by a footballer. Maybe I'm overreacting, but it was absolutely horrific. But in terms of Jan Vertonghen coming back, I expected that. I thought we would go 3 at the back and use Sissoko in a wing-back sort of position with Rose at the other side. But obviously he didn't do that, and he went for a flat-back 4, which didn't work quite clearly. The only other decision in there, I guess, was whether to give Moura a game instead of Lamela. But he tends to like Lamela in these sort of games because of his combative approach, and he does track back. All right, he gets his mandatory booking and whatnot, but he can put in a bit of a defensive shift, which the others obviously can't contribute. So I think he would have felt that Son Heung-min and Lucas Moura, both in the same team there, would have not perhaps given defensive stability, and he would have been mindful of the fact that we had a makeshift right back. So, and then the Arsenal side, I guess, again, it's the formation that surprises me more so. I guess to get those 3 in, Pepe, Lacazette, Aubameyang, that's where you want to be, but you're sacrificing something, aren't you? Because then Aubameyang is obviously the full guy who has to drop out wide because he's better in that role than Lacazette is, arguably. So you're left with a 3 in midfield there that doesn't really give you that much width, because neither Aubameyang or Pepe are the type, or Pepe, I've only had a look at him a couple of times, are the type to be able to get back. So I think that contributed to the first half, Arsenal finding themselves overrunning midfield a little bit from time to time. So I think the big challenge for Emery for me is how is he going to get that 3 up front and not lose anything? Okay, there's only so many times you're going to play a team in the top 6, and against the smaller sides you might get away with it, but there is obviously some balance that he needs to find there.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, when I looked at the Arsenal side, and just to point out quickly on that graphic, it was actually Davinson Sanchez that was playing at right back rather than Toby Alderweireld. But in terms of the Arsenal team, you're absolutely right, I think, when you say that the midfield was too narrow. Now, for me, if you're going to play Pepe, Lacazette and Aubameyang up front, you've got to accept that Pepe and Aubameyang are not going to get back and do as much defensive work as maybe somebody else would. And that what that means, though, is it means that the likes of Sead Kolasinac and Ainsley Maitland-Niles need to be a bit more mindful about when they go, when they don't go, because it did leave us exposed so many times. The midfield was too narrow. They were unable to get out into those wide areas and protect those positions. And at times in the first half, particularly in the first few minutes, I thought Sokratis was being pulled all over the place. And I turned around to the gentleman, Dan, next to me, and I said, Dan, Sokratis looks awful. But in actual fact, he was cleaning up the mess that was left by Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Now, I don't want to have a go at Ainsley Maitland-Niles because he is a young player with a lot of ability, and he's not a fullback. And I feel like his career is potentially going down the wrong road because he's being forced to play in this position, and perhaps he's going to be labelled as an average player when in actual fact he's a very good footballer, but he's just being played out of position. The first goal, Spurs, of course, had lots and lots of movement in that final third. I thought the runs that sort of Son and Eriksen were making across each other and stuff, that was brilliant, wasn't it, Mike? And Arsenal just couldn't live with it.
Yeah, but Harry as well. I mean, I've got to agree with you in terms of the midfield, and even though I don't think Sokratis and Luiz were good today, I think they weren't helped by our midfield whatsoever. I mean, the gap in between the last holding midfielder and the centre backs was ridiculous, and what that meant when that first goal happened, Sokratis pushed up. And for the long ball that was played to Harry Kane, which he won, I mean, you either stay back and let Xhaka handle it, or you go and you actually challenge for the ball. And what he did, he sort of just like ducked out of the way and all of a sudden you've got players looming on David Luiz on his own, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles running back to cover, and he just can't do it. So the whole thing was a bit of a mess, and Socrates really, to be honest, I think he pussied out of it a little bit, which you don't usually say about him. But if you go, you have to get there, and he didn't. But my main problem with Harry today, just looking at that first goal as well, was the midfield. I think there has to be some sort of balance there, and I don't think Xhaka is the guy to do that. And also as well, I wanted to ask you, do you think there's anything going on between Torreira and Unai Emery? Because ever since the second half of the season last year, he hasn't been playing, and I don't really know why. I don't know if he's fallen out of favour, he's not in form, but he's not playing in the team.
I don't think that they've had a falling out. I think that, if I'm honest, I think Lucas Torreira's performances have dropped off. I didn't think he was particularly good today. I thought he was really busy in the sense that he's always involved in the sort of hustle and bustle in midfield. But what was he actually giving to the team? Not a great deal. I think with Granit Xhaka, we've spoken about him already. He's going to get a lot of stick, and deservedly so. But for me, I do think he picked it up a little bit in the second half. I thought his passing in the second period was outstanding. We're going to come on to Guendouzi in a little bit, because he was brilliant for me, man of the match, particularly in the second half. But sticking to the point of the first goal, and we're going to try and do things in a little bit of an order. Dan, Bernd Leno's got to do better there, hasn't he? I mean, Eriksen's done well to follow it up. He's left Socrates behind. It's a good run and everything. He's done well to follow it up. Lamella's done pretty well too. The whole move is good from a Spurs perspective, but Bernd Leno's got to do better there, hasn't he? He's literally parried it into Eriksen's path, and it wasn't that much of a difficult shot from Lamella in my view.
No, I mean, it was a tame shot, and Lamella on his weaker foot. I mean, it's a really weak foot. It's not like your standard weak foot. Like, this is the type of guy who would prefer to attempt a Rabona than actually use his right foot. So, I mean, when you see him bearing down on goal on his right foot, I don't feel the need to panic. I think he got his footwork a little bit wrong. He didn't get himself in the best position. He left himself overstretching a little bit, and he couldn't get the power in his wrist to parry it away. Looking at the replay, I wasn't sure if he tried to sort of just gather it in himself, but I mean, it's really weak. You saw Guendouzi's attempt early in the second half where it's a similar sort of position, and Lloris managed to get a good fist away. And ultimately, it has cost you a goal, I think, is one that the keeper should have dealt with. I mean, the whole move, like you say, it was a good, well-worked move. We've seen Harry Kane do this a lot in recent seasons where he comes back to win the ball and create space for players running in behind him. Obviously, Socrates has completely taken himself out of the game, which has opened the space, and we exploited it pretty well. But from a defensive point of view, obviously, there's 2 or 3 situations where that can be dealt with. And I think for me there, Luiz should be thinking about making a foul as well. He made it far too easy for Son to skip on by. So it's a bit of a mess from an Arsenal perspective, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And at 2-0, how are you feeling at that time, Dan? You surely must think that, you're on course to win the game.
Yeah, I guess how I'm feeling is I always try and look at games from the opposition perspective. And I think there's a key point in this game here, which is if you look at how Spurs have played the first 45 minutes, we were a better side, in my opinion, over 45 minutes, despite Arsenal controlling the ball as you'd expect. But we look more dangerous. I'm looking at it thinking, we're going to score again. If we get to half-time at 2-0, we're going to score again, because Arsenal will commit. We're picking them off at the break, similar to the goal we've just discussed there. And there's always going to be chances for us. Obviously, we conceded before half-time, which changed the complexion completely. But from an Arsenal point of view, and watching it from an Arsenal point of view, I think the key point in this game today was Alexis Sanchez from first minute to last was terrible. So once that second goal has gone in, Danny Rose isn't having a good game either, even at this point. So
Did
if
you mean
I'm
Davinson Sanchez?
Yeah, I was going to say he's the
I think Alexis Sanchez. It's been an Arsenal show, you see. I think Alexis Sanchez might have had a better game at right back as well, for what it's worth. But I think if I'm Arsenal, I'm looking at that. And if you go 2-0 down in games at home, your heads can drop. But I think at any point in that game, Arsenal would have looked at this and thought, we can get back in this because of what's happening in the fullback position. So obviously I felt confident. I felt we could score again. But I knew that Arsenal were not in a position where the game was going to be closed up. we've got a back four there. You've got two players playing poorly, and one player. I mean, I don't want to overdo it on an Arsenal show talking about Tottenham, but I can't recall a performance that bad, an individual performance that bad from a professional footballer who's cost £42 million, by the way. I don't understand why he wasn't substituted either. We had a right back on the bench, so if you're not going to bring him on in that game,
Centre back though, like I do feel a bit sorry for him. It's such a different thing, but playing out there.
Yeah, I do feel sorry for him in the sense that he's being asked to do a job similar to Maitland-Niles. You don't want to pick on the guy too much because he's being asked to do a job. But against Aston Villa this season, and I'll keep it brief because we're on Tottenham here, but against Aston Villa this season, against Newcastle, we conceded 2 goals. Sanchez, a centre half. I haven't a fault for both of those. So there's no excuse to be positionally that badly, to be positionally that poor as a centre half. You should be able to shuffle across and do some kind of a job. I can understand if you're getting beat for pace time and time again, you can't do a lot about that. But so I felt from a Spurs point of view, I'm looking at this thinking there is a way back into this for Arsenal, attacking our fullback positions. And I was surprised, if I'm honest, I thought both managers got quite a bit wrong on the day, actually. But why Emery didn't stick Pepe over on that side for a little bit and get him running at Sanchez and give him an opportunity for a bit of crossing practice, I couldn't quite understand that.
Yeah, I was saying at certain points in the game that I'd have liked to have seen Aubameyang and Pepe switch, and they did do it a couple of times, but not for any sustained period of time. I wanted to see them use their pace and go on the outside of the fullbacks and really take them down the line and put them under a lot of pressure. And I feel like, we're talking about Davinson Sanchez being a potential weakness. I thought that Spurs did well to expose the Ainsley Maitland-Niles weakness in the first period, because you saw Son pulling out there. You saw Kane moving out there sometimes. I think it was when the penalty came about, I think Harry Winks had moved out there as well. And it was clearly an area that Spurs were going to expose. And like you said, Arsenal, had the option to do the same at the other sort of end of the pitch. But it just felt like, I agree with Dan. I think both managers got quite a bit wrong today. I think that's a good way of summarising it. Turning point in the game, though, Mike, Alexander Lacazette, of course. How massive was it to get that goal before half time, and how good was the touch and finish from Alex Lacazette?
I mean, the whole thing, it did stem from a Danny Rose mistake, who again today I thought was poor. I thought Pepe should have attacked him more, really, because 1-on-1, I mean, he wasn't getting anywhere, no change whatsoever, and he's headed it out, and we've lost possession. But the way that the 3 players pressed in and won it back, Pepe's got the ball out wide and played it into Lacazette, and my word, I mean, what a 3 touches you'll see. I mean, the first to control it dead, the ball's bouncing, he flicks it over Vertonghen with his left foot, just like the slightest little touch, and then smashes it past Lloris. And it's actually right in the middle of the goal, but he's hit it with so much power that it doesn't matter. Lloris can't even react in time. And I mean, it's just, he loves the North London derby goal. And I mean, what a player he is, and what a big player in big games as well. And I was speaking to someone earlier, and they were saying, Aubameyang was so much better in the number 9 position. And I don't really agree. I think when Lacazette came off, we actually lost quite a lot, Harry. I thought he tracked back really well, did a really good job of holding it up. He's only about 5'9", but the guy wins so many headers. He backs into players. He makes a bit of a nuisance of himself. He's got a good leap on him, and I was really upset to see him go off, to be honest, because we lost quite a lot. But the goal, I mean, yeah, just sensational centre forward play.
Yeah, unbelievable. And it was the timing what was huge, because it did bring Arsenal back into the game. It lifted the Emirates Stadium as well, just before the break, because there was a lot of disappointed people. It was like we're seeing the same old shit, the defensive fragilities that have haunted us for years and years. It feels like we haven't really addressed those. I felt like as well, at times, particularly in the second half, we'll come on to the second half now, Arsenal's midfield were maybe a little bit, and I know they were chasing the game, but they were maybe pressing a little bit too high up the pitch at times. And all it took was a couple of passes, and they completely bypassed our midfield. And you'd be in situations where, Son or Kane will be carrying the ball right at the heart of the Arsenal defense. And that, for me, was still a big problem. I mean, Dan, Arsenal introduced Danny Ceballos on the pitch, and I mean, for you, you're not an Arsenal fan. Was you worried when you saw Danny Ceballos come on? There was a lot of twists and turns, pirouettes, and there was energy, and he looked up for it. What did you make of his performance?
I think he came on and he made an instant impact, didn't he? The first 5 or 10 minutes, he was lively and he was trying to make things happen. And then after that, it kind of fizzled out a little bit. But I think that was more to do with the fact that once the goal went in, the complexion of the game changed. So, like Mike mentioned there, Lacazette coming off, and perhaps he was, better in the number 9 position, and you lost quite a bit. I think comparing the time before Lacazette came off and the time after he came off becomes difficult because the goal came so soon after that. So I was speaking to an Arsenal mate of mine after the game. I've got 2 Arsenal mates, by the way. That's it, just 2. So I was speaking to him after the game, and he said, "Oh, if Lacazette stayed on, we'd have won," which I didn't agree with that point. But once Lacazette came off, Aubameyang came into the middle, and obviously that's where the goal stemmed from. I just think, from a Spurs perspective, if we wanted to win that game, it was almost like the earlier Arsenal scored, the better. Because we couldn't really push forward, having conceded on half-time. We had something to cling on to. So it would have been a bit kamikaze to be really brave and go and try and attack and get the 3rd goal. I mean, we tried to get forward on the break when we could, and obviously we smashed inside the post. Son was a bit wasteful, had some poor decision-making in the final third, or we perhaps could have gone 3-1 up. But once you'd scored and we didn't have to then sit back anymore, the game turned into a completely open, even game again. So it was like, it was clear that Arsenal were going to score at some point from what I was watching, unless we pinched one on a break, which can happen. But the way the game was going, we were sitting back and waiting. And it was almost like if we were going to win the game 3-2, we needed Arsenal to score quicker and give us more time then to start playing again. All right, we could have gone the other way and we could have lost. But I guess they're gambles you need to take sometimes as a football team. And away from home, perhaps deep down, Pochettino was happy with the prospect of conceding 1 goal and picking up a point. But Lacazette, I think, when he joined the club, he started off quite well and he fizzled out a little bit. I know he had an injury, didn't play that well. But unusually, I think he's kind of improved since Aubameyang has been there for whatever reason, whether it's a sharing of the load or, having the ability to switch between wide and central. It helps him a little bit. I'm not sure what it is, but, he's turned into a really good player for the club. He's scoring some important goals, as you say. But I think, at the point he came off, which was shortly after, probably about 5-10 minutes after Ceballos came on, obviously the goal had gone in and the game was a completely different game by that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's come back on to Granit Xhaka for a minute. And I want to get your view on this, Mike, because he's taken a lot of stick, and rightly so, for, the moment of stupidity. And I wanted to tear my hair out at times because he kept making that same foul where he just bundles into someone. He's so late and clumsy. And we know that Kane throws himself to the ground at every opportunity. A few of them were on Kane. A couple of them were debatable, in my opinion. From what I could see, he was literally going over like a sack of potatoes. But I want to ask you, Mike, and I want to ask Dan as well, because Dan is a little bit detached from the situation. Why does Unai Emery persist with this guy week in, week out? Because I know Lucas Torreira looked a bit tired, and I don't think, for what it's worth, Lucas Torreira had his best game in an Arsenal shirt today. But it was as though Unai Emery never even considered taking off Granit Xhaka. So what does Granit Xhaka give the team that Unai Emery values so much that he will pick him week in, week out?
I was having a chat with my mates earlier, and I said, semi-serious, semi-joking, he must have something over Arsenal Football Club, some sort of bribery going on, because it's not just under Emery. I mean, he literally played every game under Wenger as well, Harry. So it's not just him. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. He must be a sensational trainer. He must be a good leader in training. He must buy everyone, I don't know, expensive cars or something. But because there's something that's going on that we as fans don't quite understand. And even, I've got mates that are football analysts, and I say, please, just explain to me what it is that Xhaka does. And
Oh, have we lost Mike for a minute? Dan, you're on mute.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, we lost you. Carry on.
Granit Xhaka. Don't miss it. No, Mesut Ozil. I just sent it to Mesut Ozil now. Yeah, Granit Xhaka. Basically, I'm thinking what he actually does, Harry. Apart from his passing range, which is very good, switches the play, and as we saw, as you mentioned in the second half, he did do very well. I think he does move us forward, and when I look at our team in midfield, I think the main point is we don't have many great passes in the side. And that's an area where we're lacking. I think Guendouzi could become that, and the assist for Aubameyang's goal shows you he does have that range of passing. But is it consistent? Not at the moment. But as I mentioned earlier, that range of passing isn't good enough to make up for the mistakes that he makes. And as we saw last season, he's not. He's not undroppable. I think Emery did drop him for a few games last season. So, and I think if those mistakes keep happening, it will happen. I'm not sure what was going on with Wenger, because when he did make mistakes week in, week out, he never got dropped. But I think we will see it, to be honest.
Dan, as an opposition supporter, you know, I thought that in the second half, Granit Xhaka sorted himself out a little bit, and he was pinging some good passes, sort of opening spaces up for the wide men and things like that. What is it that Granit Xhaka brings to the table as someone who hasn't got an agenda against him? And I'm not saying that Mike has, but a lot of Arsenal fans do. What does Granit Xhaka bring to the table from your sort of view?
Okay, yeah. So look at it objectively, because it's easy to have the club scapegoat, and there's always one. And you know, there's one every season. And if this season is Xhaka, then so be it. But you look at it from Emery's point of view, it's clear the type of football that Emery wants to play. He wants to press high in midfield where he can. Xhaka can do that. He wants to get the ball and rotate it, and he wants ball playing midfielders. He's brought Sabalassin on loan. He's plucked Guendouzi out of nowhere at 17 years of age, and he's persisted with him through some tough times because he knows he can play the ball. So he needs a ball winner, right? So you're looking at the ball winners there. He's got two options, hasn't he? He's got Torreira or Granit Xhaka, right? So if I make a comparison to Eric Dyer, who played for Spurs quite a lot, like 3 or 4 seasons ago, what I think Emery will like with Xhaka is the versatility and flexibility that he offers. So he can be the ball winner when he needs to win the ball, as can Torreira. Can he press as well as Torreira? Can Torreira press as well as Xhaka? Probably not. And then when you're on the attack and you're pressing up and you're playing a more aggressive style of play, is Torreira as good as Xhaka at that? Probably not. So you mentioned there that Xhaka sorted himself out in the second half. It's not so much he sorted himself out, in my opinion. It was that the game had shifted to a point where the game was being played in Tottenham's half. So could Torreira have had as positive an impact in those areas of the field as Xhaka could? I don't believe he can. So I think that's probably what Emery's looking for, in my opinion. It's someone with the versatility so that if the tactics need to change in game, he can do it without making a sub. You know, in this day and age, you know, you don't want to be subbing off your defensive midfielder. It's the last place you want to look. You don't want to be changing things. Today he's hooked Torreira because he's made an attacking substitution. But really, I think in an ideal world, if he goes with this formation here that you've got on your screen, there's probably only room for one of the two in there, and it will be Xhaka, I think, for the reasons that we've discussed. Go on.
I slightly disagree with you regarding the pressing thing. I think that Torreira is probably more equipped to press the ball, and I think that Xhaka's probably got a better passing range and can be a little bit more creative at times. And I think that's probably where Emery prefers him. But I was having this conversation with some friends on the way home from the game. And what I was saying was that when you look at Arsenal's midfield options, you've got different attributes to choose from. So you've got Granit Xhaka's got a good range of passing, but defensively he's an absolute disaster. Lucas Torreira presses well. He's very dogged. He's very determined. But does he use the ball as well as he should? Probably not. Matteo Guendouzi is very energetic, very positive, plays with his heart on his sleeve. But at times, and I know he put in a great ball for Aubameyang today, but at times he's wasteful in possession as well. Ceballos is a bit of a flair player, likes to twist and turn, pick out passes, but what's he like defensively? Mesut Ozil, we all know about Mesut Ozil. And it feels like within Arsenal's midfield, we've got all the different attributes that a manager would want, but we don't have them in one or two or three players. We seem to have a really odd mix of players, and if you could combine some of those players, you'd probably find the right balance. But it feels like we've been signing players to try and plug holes, but we haven't signed any specialists as such in what they're supposed to do. And that's the problem that you've got. You've got Granit Xhaka, who's got a good passing range but can't defend. So, what do you do with him? Lucas Torreira has some good points, but some bad points. And the point I'm trying to make is none of them are world class. So you end up, or top class even. So you end up with an average bunch. And I think that is why Unai Emery has such a huge problem determining what the best midfield trio is, and why we see it change so much. Mike, what do you think about that?
Yeah, do you know what I was thinking about that? And I was just harking back to the best teams in the country, and that's Man City and Liverpool. And what I was thinking was, it doesn't necessarily matter too much what the personnel is for like a Man City and Liverpool, as long as they fit within the system. Like we saw with Man City when Aymeric Laporte went off, Fernandinho slotted into centre back, and I know it was against Brighton; there were a few goals up already, but it doesn't really matter for Liverpool. No matter who they have in that midfield three, they all play a similar role. They all press. They all work hard. Fabinho sits slightly deeper, but the two number eights both do a very similar job. When I think of Arsenal, I don't think of that. I don't think, oh yeah, that's the system they play. That's the type of football that Emery wants. I don't really know what it is, Harry, and I think that's where you're getting that. The fact that there are all these different players and all these different combinations. The fact he goes from a 4-2-3-1 to a 4-3-3, and he played a 3 at the back last season. He doesn't know what the best system is. He doesn't know what the players are in to fit in that system, because it doesn't exist. So I just think we're going to have this problem until he works out what his best team is and how it is he wants to play, and then getting the players that fit into that. And I think that's the issue where we're at the moment. And I think because we're chopping and changing so much, the players go into the game, they don't know fully what they're meant to do. And when you're pulling players off at half time and changing them, you're getting the problem, but even worse, because they're coming into a game they're not accustomed to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a real issue with Arsenal, and it's something that really, really needs addressing. I think there needs to be a settled system. But what I will say about Arsenal is I think they played with immense character and heart in that second half, and for that they deserve a lot of credit. And I'm going to talk about the man of the match in a little bit. But another point I want to touch on is the use of the VAR. And I want to come to Dan on this, because me and Dan, we spend hours in a day on WhatsApp arguing about VAR and various other subjects. But VAR is one of the ones that we constantly go back and forward on. Now, today I had a weird experience with VAR, because, of course, the Arsenal equaliser, when Aubameyang put it in, we all celebrated, we all went mad. And then sort of halfway through my celebration, I realised that, hold on a minute, this is going to go to VAR. And from where I was behind the goal, I couldn't possibly tell whether or not Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was offside. And we've seen, that they look at it in such detail, and it can be so marginal at times, that I kind of stopped my celebration and I was thinking about the VAR. And then we had a little bit of an anxious wait until they checked it. I saw it on the replay on the big screen, and I was pretty sure after seeing the replay that it was onside. But there was that weird little moment. And then there was, the Socrates one where he bundled the ball in, and everybody said about, the flag went up originally, but then there's that hope. VAR gives you that hope that, the linesman was wrong and it could be a goal. Dan, VAR's been a bit of a disaster in the Premier League so far. I hold my hands up to that, despite being a supporter of it. I can't understand why the Premier League have taken it upon themselves to use it differently to the other leagues that have been using it for a while now and are far more advanced in terms of embedding the process into their game. But VAR did okay today, didn't it? I mean, it took away from a couple of the moments for me, but it can work, can't it, Dan?
Can it work? I don't think it can work overall. I don't. I thought he did well today, so I'll be fair in the fact that today it worked. It had quite a few things to get involved with, and you barely noticed it was there. So there was 2 or 3 penalty appeals. It didn't overturn anything and get those wrong. Obviously, it verified the offside goal. That was the only thing it did badly for me. I thought that took too long. You could see on the screen quite clearly that the linesman was correct. I don't see why that took quite so long to get right. It did its job today. It did what it was there for. People would look at that. People who were, I hate VAR, but you got to be fair when you're having a debate about it, and you've got to say when it did a good job. Now the cynical people will say, well, it didn't have a lot to do. I think it had quite a bit to do today. There was 3 or 4 times there were people on the floor in the box. There was some contact involved in those occasions, and the video had to look at it. The bit I don't like at the minute, and it does need to change if it's going to have any chance of working, is this, well, unless it's clear and obvious, we're going to stick with the referee's decision. What if Martin Atkinson had decided that Harry Kane was a penalty at the end? Yeah. What if Martin Atkinson had viewed that in a different way? So just to be clear to my Arsenal friends, I don't think that was a penalty in a million years. But what VAR is saying to us, well, if Martin Atkinson saw Socrates cut across, Kane get tripped and go down and give the penalty, VAR is not going to overturn that because it's not clear and obvious. I can't accept that situation. Likewise, there was a very, not very similar actually. That's a bit harsh. It wasn't as bad. But Socrates threw himself down in the box about 20 minutes before, didn't he?
Yeah.
Which hasn't quite made the post-match analysis in a similar way. That to me is, we've got players there, knowing VAR is there, trying to throw themselves down under any contact. For me, that's not a penalty in a million years either. What happens if Martin Atkinson pointed to the spot there? The VAR ref is not going to be brave enough to overturn it. So there needs to be work there. Today, it got every decision. It got every decision right for me. Took a little bit too long with the offside.
Okay, Mike, Harry Kane, and Dan will have his chance to defend him in a minute. But how many times are we going to see this guy throw himself to the floor, get away with it, and, it's like it never happened? It drives me absolutely mad, because if it was anybody else, if this was Raheem Sterling, for example, this would be all over the papers. But Harry Kane continues to throw himself to the ground in the penalty box, outside the penalty box. It's everywhere. It's just ridiculous. And I understand that forwards will draw fouls at times to give themselves and their team a break and a breather at certain points in a game. But Harry Kane is a persistent offender, and it doesn't get the coverage that it deserves. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, we know why that is, because he's England's golden boy. I mean, it's obvious, and you're 100% spot on, because if Raheem Sterling had done what he did today, he'd be all over the papers. The Mail Online would be plastered with Raheem Sterling for weeks and weeks. And because it's Harry Kane, he gets away with it. I thought what he did today was actually a bit disgusting, to be honest with you. I think it is, because trying to act like when someone's put your hand on your back, your legs are bowed and you've collapsed and fallen on the floor. I think it's just is nasty behaviour. It's almost like as bad as Jamie Vardy when I remember we played. I can't remember if it was at Leicester or at the Emirates, and he sort of bows himself into the defender to initiate contact to give the penalty. And that is one. You're talking about VAR. That's one good thing of VAR, because you only had to see it once, not even twice, not even 3 times, to see that it was a clear dive. And I think that's one of the positives that will come from VAR. But just on VAR in general, yeah, it worked well today. But from what I saw yesterday, Harry, it was shambolic. Firstly, this is situations like I'm talking about Crystal Palace at Aston Villa here, where Aston Villa's late equaliser was ruled out because Jack Grealish dived. First of all, on first look, the referees had an absolute shocker because Jack Grealish has not even said that he's dived. He's got up and just carried on straight away. And then the unwillingness of VAR to overturn what the referee's done is another joke. Why England are doing it differently, I have no idea. Why is there not a TV camera at the side of the pitch like there is in other leagues? Just so the referee, if he's made a mistake, he doesn't have to have pride about it. He can go and check his decision and see if he was wrong. I think personally the VAR should have been introduced slowly. I think they shouldn't have thrown in these new handball laws and penalties and offsides. I think it should have been stuck to stuff. There's black and white. He's offside. He's offside, and there's no second judgment about that. But what it is at the moment, it's just another opinion. And it's all circumstantial. One referee might think this, one referee might think another. So that's what the problem is. And I don't think it's going to improve if they don't make it simpler.
Dan, if Harry Kane went down under that Socrates challenge, and I agree with you that what you said earlier, Socrates did throw himself down in the box. I think Aubameyang tried to get away with one as well, which is
He got away with one at the last North London derby as well, if you recall.
Oh, the one where Vertonghen was in line with the 6-yard box when he struck the penalty. That's the one.
The one when that one.
The one where you got away with a penalty that should never have been a penalty because Kane was camping on the edge of our 6-yard box as well. Is that the one? Anyway, lost my trail of thought there. Right, Harry Kane. He goes down under that challenge from Socrates, and the referee's quick to dismiss the penalty appeal, wave it away. When I say that Harry Kane gets away with murder, it's because the referee has allowed him to walk away from that situation without being shown a yellow card. Why is that?
Why is the referee not showing him a yellow card?
Yeah.
He should show him a yellow card. If he hasn't given it and he thinks it's a dive, you're into this stupid place with football now where you only tend to get booked if it's like a complete air dive, and obviously there's different ways of diving. So I don't think the one we're talking about here is that bad. I've seen worse from Kane in the past. The one at Anfield a couple of years ago was where he's clearly dived into a keeper's leg. This one I don't think that's bad. So you are allowed to wait for contact. You are allowed to try and win a penalty. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Like I don't see what the issue is with doing that. Obviously, what he's done this time that for me makes it a dive, and I'm glad that penalties like this aren't given. Is obviously he sort of jumped into the defender. So I understand why he's done it. Like it's the last minute of a North London derby.
It's worth a try, is it?
It's not. It's worth a try. If you look at the whole situation, like Kane's not a silly guy. He knows what's going on. He's running into the box. He knows he probably hasn't got a pace at that point to get by. He sees Socrates behind him, who is a complete meathead. Let's have it right. Socrates is more than capable of running into his back. He's cut across him. He's waited for him to run into his back. Socrates hasn't done that remarkably, and he sort of jumped into him to try and win a penalty. The referee's been wise to it. Great decision by the ref. VAR obviously not going to intervene, and that's fine. I've got no issue with it. I don't think that's that bad a dive in the general scheme of things. I'm glad they're not penalties. I wouldn't want it given in the other box. So I'm pretty... it's very difficult for me to say something's a penalty. I don't like penalties being handed out like confetti. It annoys me. Something more than that needs to happen for a penalty to be given. But... Yeah. You do hear this a lot with Kane. He's a Premier League, he's an English golden boy and blah, 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 blah. But then he gets a lot of criticism for diving when he hasn't dived. And part of the people will say, well, no, that's his reputation going before him. I'm not sure it is. I think he scores a lot of penalties. He wins a lot of penalties. He is a striker who lacks a bit of pace compared to some of the other top strikers in the league. So I think he looks for ways to make that up. And, you might say this is a poor defence of him. But, if you've got Socrates, who commits 45 fouls a half probably, running behind you, what's he supposed to do? He shouldn't jump out the way. So he's obviously waited for the foul. It's good defending by Socrates, ultimately. Harry Kane's got himself between the defender and the ball in the penalty box, and Socrates has defended well. I don't think it was that bad. I don't think it was that bad a dive, in the general scheme of things, to be warranting airtime. Or I think he was questioned about it after the game. Bearing in mind, if I'm Kane last week, I've been rugby tackled, I haven't got a penalty. I probably wouldn't have tried that expecting it. But there'd have been more value in him getting a shot off. I'd rather my forward at that point toe punts one at the keeper's toes and hopes to get lucky, because realistically you're not going to get that penalty.
Yeah, fair enough. Just to wrap up, guys, we've come towards the end of this live podcast. We'll be bringing you more North London Derby reaction tomorrow and throughout the week. We'll be looking back on the game. It's an international break next week, isn't it? So we'll have to spend some time looking back on previous games, maybe have a little check-in as to how Arsenal have done so far this season. I know it's very early days, but like I said, international break, and this is a game that we can go on and talk about for days and days. It was that good. It was that entertaining from a neutral perspective anyway. But I want to finally get you guys' man of the match, and I'm going to start with mine. Mine was Matteo Guendouzi. Didn't think he was all that great in the first half. Didn't think Arsenal were great as a team in the first half. I thought the midfield was really unbalanced. It was outplayed for large parts, in the sense that they were being pulled out of position and drawn into areas that they didn't want to go. But I thought that in the second half, Guendouzi was sensational. I thought his energy was incredible, and that fed through to the rest of the team. I thought the ball that he played for Aubameyang to score the equaliser was brilliant. And I've often spoken about Matteo Guendouzi's, sometimes inability to pick the right pass, and maybe the fact that he's a little bit wasteful in possession at times. But I think he deserves immense credit. And whilst he's not always been consistent, today he showed for me that there is a player in there, and that Arsenal are right to want to help him develop and keep hold of him. Mike, your man of the match.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be boring and agree with you. I mean, I could say Xhaka, to be honest. No, I could.
No, you couldn't. You really couldn't. Even I couldn't today.
I actually would have said if I'm not sure what happened to Lacazette. I think did he get injured? I'm not sure. I think
a gentleman next to me, Dan, a good friend of mine who stands next to me, he made the point that normally when Lacazette gets taken off in this kind of game, he's visibly annoyed at being taken off. So the fact that he wasn't visibly annoyed,
he signalled to the bench. So
yeah.
When Torreira went off, as Torreira
I didn't see that from in the ground. But
so he signalled to the bench and asked to go off, and then he was subbed off within 2-3 minutes.
Yeah, I would have said I would have said him, but if he would have played more, because obviously he got the goal that got us back into the game, and that was just a moment of magic from him. And if it wasn't for him, if we did go into, as Dan said earlier, if we went into the break at 2-0 down, I think it would have been a very different game, and I think Spurs would have picked us off in the second half. So I will say Lacazette, because I think his contribution to our comeback was so massive, and just how much he's come on, Harry, and become this lethal, clinical striker that can do so much more than just score, and he adds so much to our play, and I think he's going to be vital for us this season. So yeah, I'm going to say Lacazette. Also,
though, Lacazette's hold-up play at times doesn't get enough credit, and I think Kane is very good at this as well. And Dan, you'll be able to add to this point. Sometimes it's not necessarily about them scoring the goal; it's about them creating the space for the likes of Aubameyang or Pepe, or in Spurs' case, Son and Lamela, to make those late runs into those areas and burst into those positions. Just because a Lacazette or an Aubameyang is occupying the defenders, and that is often just as important, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, I think especially as a number 9. They're not like Salah type strikers who come in from the wings and are hard to pick up. With a number 9, the more goals you score, the harder it becomes, because you literally get surrounded. So you need to go and find something else to do. If you're Lacazette and Kane in this case, and your team has scored 2 goals, you've done your job. Whether you've scored them yourself or you've made space for someone else, your job's done. If it takes 3 players to mark you, and obviously Lacazette, he's got the benefit of having Aubameyang there with him, which I mentioned earlier in the show. Having someone to help you switch it around to keep you fresh, so you're not getting frustrated 80 minutes into a game because you've had 6 defenders on your toes for the whole game and people are looking at you to score goals. So Lacazette, he's a good striker when he comes to Arsenal. He's a good striker in the French league, and he's doing some great stuff, and he's scoring different types of goals, inside, outside the box, poachers goals. He's linking up well with his strike partner. It's one of the positives of Arsenal's team, having those 2 strikers working well together. I think he was a good shout. He was a good shout for the man of the match award. I'm always a bit odd with how I watch football matches, and I kind of suggest things that everyone thinks I'm a wally, but I actually like the way Kolasinac played today. If I'm honest, I thought he was aggressive. I thought he was the most solid of the defenders. I thought he piled on when he had to, and he kept Tottenham pinned back, particularly in the second half. He was keen to get forward and contribute, and I thought he was an important player in the second half. I thought he completely he completely transformed the way Arsenal were attacking in the second half. He was bombing up the left wing. He was contributing to Spurs' weakness and kept us on the back foot. I thought he had a pretty good game. But I mean, Arsenal played well overall. I don't think Tottenham deserved to lose away from home, but I thought if Arsenal lost, it would have been an injustice as well. So there was a lot there to be happy about as an Arsenal fan. I think it was a decent performance, good character to come back. It always feels better if you've come from behind than obviously if you've thrown the lead away.
Absolutely.
But Monreal leaving, the left back situation is not ideal for Arsenal until Tierney comes back. But Kolasinac is a good player, and he's just as good getting forward. As well, he did take one off of Aubameyang's toes. Actually, I forgot about that.
That was a great chance. That was.
But there you go. But you're talking about a left back there, keen to get forward, keen to turn the game around, and confident enough to do it. He could have scored a goal himself there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that Kolasinac is very handy as an attacking weapon. He's almost like a steam train once he gets going down that left-hand side. I thought in the first half, though, he got in behind Sanchez a few times, but the ball wasn't right. And I thought he improved on that in the second half. He was picking out players. He was putting the ball into more dangerous areas. So, I definitely think Sead Kolasinac is important to Arsenal in terms of unlocking those teams, particularly when you've got an Aubameyang on the left who's going to step inside naturally because he's right-footed. That player stepping inside creates the channel for someone like Kolasinac to get into and make that overlapping run. And that can be a really good weapon. Guys, that brings us to the end. My thanks to Mike. Mike, thank you very much for coming on, both of you, at such short notice. We were going to do this tomorrow, but we thought, what the hell, let's do it tonight while things are fresh in the mind. Mike, do you want to let our listeners know how they can follow you and how they can check out the fantastic shows that you produce?
Yeah, so follow me at Mike_Stavrou, spelt just like that. Stavrou, Greek name, hard to spell. Also, as well, I do some work at Love Sport Radio, but I share lots of that on my page, so just give me a follow down there.
Brilliant stuff. And Mr. Dan De Luca, my good friend and colleague over at the Sofa Sports podcast. Do you want to let people know how they can follow you? Are you still on Twitter?
So I'm happy I've survived an audience with Gooners. So that's
Do you know what as well? I've been looking at the comments and nobody has slated you, which is really
no
good.
abuse. No abuse.
No,
you've been very fair, mate. I have to say, you've been fair.
I can't speak about the comments that are going to come after the live stream. But the live stream comments are pretty good. Guys, before we wrap up, those of you watching live, give us a rating for Dan De Luca's performance out of 10 in the comment section below, and we'll touch on a couple of them. But yeah, Dan, sorry, go ahead. How can people keep up with what you're doing?
So I have had to delete Twitter due to me getting annoyed at people talking rubbish, and I had a bit of a strop a few weeks ago. So you can't follow me on there at the minute, but I'm on the Sofa Sports podcast with Mr. Harry Symeou most weeks, and our co-host Alavi. So I know he streams it on his channel quite a lot. So you can hear me chatting nonsense on there.
Yeah, we do stream it from the Chronicles of a Gooner channel too. It's a general football chat. feel free to tune in. Now let's go over to a couple of those comments. As he says, no abuse for the Spurs fan. He's very neutral and balanced. He also gives you a 9.
Wow.
He says, I feel he called it fair. He would have got a 10 if he called Kane a diver.
Don't take liberties now.
Graham Sutherland gives you a 3.
Oh.
Graham, that's disappointing. Why? Let me know why. Because I disagree with you. Oh, wait, hold on. Graham's come with another, actually slightly better looking than Kane.
Well, I should think so.
I mean, that's not really hard, is it? Come on.
Dan can speak properly. He can spell. You know, he can shut his mouth. His tongue's not so big that he can't shut his mouth.
I can take a penalty. I can take a penalty as well, for your information, Graham.
That's it. There you go. Russ Morgan gives you an 8 out of 10, Dan. That's a good score.
That's reasonable.
Score. Dan's getting some good scores. Dan, we might make you a Gooner soon. You might as well.
Yeah,
I'll be a 3 then. Right.
And as he also goes on to say, I liked your comment on Kolasinac. That was a top comment, Dan. So a big thank you to Dan for being a good sport, because his team did bottle it this afternoon, as they always do. The bottle jobs of London. We've got another 8 out of 10 for you there, by the way, Dan. Brilliant.
These are all Spurs fans listening.
So yeah, as I was saying, a big thanks to Dan, because he's been a good sport and come on. And it's not easy to come on an Arsenal channel when you are a Spurs fan, particularly after what happened today and when emotions are running high. Everyone kept a cool head and had a great discussion. Graham has corrected his comment. He says, seriously, he was cool for a Spurs fan 9. There you go. Right. That brings us to the end of this podcast. As I said, we'll be back throughout the week with more. Going to leave you with a quick advert from our sponsors, loserpool.com. Head over there, sign up. You can play the game for free and you can potentially win £1,000. All you got to do is pick a Premier League side to lose from week to week. It's that simple. And we'll be back very, very soon.